Long ago, before the Krusty Krab ever stood tall on its coral foundation, there was only the gentle sound of the ocean. The water moved with an endless rhythm, like a lullaby, carrying stories of the sea from one reef to another. And somewhere, in a quiet corner of Bikini Bottom, a humble crab named Eugene Krabs sat alone, dreaming of a better life. Mr. Krabs had not yet built his famous restaurant. He did not yet own his proud cash register boat, or the squeaky doors that would one day welcome thousands of hungry customers. At this time, his world was much smaller. He lived in a little shack made of driftwood and patched shells, the kind of home that leaned gently when the tides pulled against it. It was cozy, though filled with the faint scent of salt, the creak of old wood, and the soft, constant bubbling of a cooking pot. Krabs had one passion, aside from the glimmer of coins and the sparkle of treasure. He loved food. More than food itself, he loved the idea of creating something that others could enjoy. Late at night, while the ocean above grew still and the stars shimmered faintly through the water, Mr. Krabs would sit with a frying pan, experimenting with different ingredients. The little shack would glow with the dim light of a lantern, its flame swaying as if it, too, was tired but trying to stay awake. Krabs would hum sea shanties under his breath as he worked, stirring, flipping, and tasting. Sometimes his experiments turned out strange, a patty made of kelp that was far too soggy, or one made of seaweed strips that crumbled at the first bite. Other times, the results were closer to something special, but not quite right. Too salty, too bland, too chewy. And yet Krabs never gave up. Night after night, he tried again. The ocean has a way of being both endless and patient. The waves never rush, but they never stop either. And so, with that same patience, Mr. Krabs carried on. In those long hours, he wasn't the greedy restaurant owner we know today. He was just a dreamer, a crab with an idea, someone hoping to create a meal that could make others happy. The story goes that the first true Krabby Patty came together almost by accident. On one particularly calm evening, the tides were low and the water outside the shack was so still it looked like glass. The lantern light flickered warmly against the walls, and Krabs was working with his usual determination. He had gathered a few scraps from the market that day, a soft piece of coral bread, a pinch of glowing sea salt, and a small slab of kelp meat that had been pressed flat. As he stood over the pan, the quiet sound of sizzling filled the room. The shack smelled of warmth and comfort. He layered the bread and the kelp, sprinkling in a dash of something special he had saved a spice from a traveling merchant, one he had almost forgotten he owned. Slowly, carefully, he pressed the pieces together, the way a jeweler might fit 2 gems into a single crown. When he took the first bite, Mr. Krabs didn't taste just food. He tasted possibility. He tasted the beginning of something that could change his life. The patty was simple, yes, but there was something undeniably comforting about it, something that made the heart feel warm and the mind feel calm. Of course, no one else was there to share it with him. The shack was silent. The waves outside whispered gently against the sand, and Mr. Krabs sat in the glow of his lantern, chewing slowly, thinking deeply. The very first Krabby Patty was not made for money. It was not even made for customers. It was made in the quiet of the night, as a gift to himself, proof that he could create something special. Some say that's why the Krabby Patty carries its magic to this very day. Because it was born in solitude, under the stars, in the patient hands of a crab who was simply trying to make something good. The taste of kindness, effort, and a dream all blended together. And so the legend began, not with a grand opening, not with crowds cheering or lines of hungry customers, but with one crab, one lantern, and the soft sound of sizzling in the night. If you close your eyes, you might almost hear it yourself. The gentle hiss of the pan, the faint crackle as the kelp cooks, and the sigh of a crab who, for just one moment, feels truly content. The legend of the first patty is not just a story about food. It is a story about patience, about dreams, and about how sometimes the quietest nights can create the loudest legacies. The night after that first successful patty, Mr. Krabs found himself thinking about it again and again. It wasn't the way gold coins or treasure maps filled his thoughts, but something softer. The memory of that taste lingered with him, almost like a lullaby that plays in the background of your dreams. When the ocean swayed outside his window and the moonlight drifted down through the water, he felt it calling him back to the pan. He wondered, could I make it again? Could I make it even better? And so he tried. He gathered new ingredients, carefully chosen from what little he could afford. A fresher piece of sea bun, a crisp lettuce leaf that shimmered faintly green in the dim lantern light, a slice of tomato cut so thin it looked like a glowing coin in his claw. And once again, he set the pan on the fire, listening to the soft hiss as the patty began to cook. The shack filled with a cozy warmth. The bubbling oil sounded like ocean foam gently popping against the shore. The smell of toasted bread drifted through the small wooden walls, mixing with the salty air. Mr. Krabs worked slowly, almost tenderly, as though each movement mattered. He stacked the layers with care, as though building a treasure chest, only this treasure wasn't gold, but flavor. When the patty was done, he sat by the lantern, the flickering glow reflecting off his shell. He took a bite, and then another, and soon he realized he was smiling a rare, genuine smile, not the greedy grin he'd wear years later when counting his money. But Krabs was not the only one who noticed. Outside his shack, drifting quietly in the night, the smell had carried through the water. Tiny fish, curious shrimp, and even a sleepy jellyfish or two floated nearby, wondering where such a comforting aroma had come from. Of course, none dared to knock on his door, but the ocean seemed to know. Something new had been created that night. And so the legend of the patty grew, not through words, but through whispers of scent and story. The following evenings, Krabs kept experimenting. Some nights he added extra toppings, testing if the patty could be improved. Some nights he tried sauces creamy, tangy, or sweet, learning slowly that balance was the key. But through every attempt, one truth became clear. The patty was more than food. It was a feeling. There's something calming about food made with care. Each patty carried the rhythm of the sea, the patience of quiet nights, and the warmth of a lantern's glow. It wasn't perfect yet, but it was becoming something special, something that seemed to hold the heart of Bikini Bottom itself. And as Mr. Krabs worked, he began to dream. He imagined a place, a restaurant, perhaps where others could taste what he had tasted. He imagined laughter filling the air, the sound of coins clinking in a register, and the joy of seeing faces light up with satisfaction. But those dreams were gentle, like clouds drifting across the sky. They were not yet sharp or greedy. For now it was simply a comfort, a vision to lull him as he cooked through the nights. It is said that sometimes, when Mr. Krabs grew tired, he would fall asleep right there at the table, his head resting on the wooden planks, the faint smell of patties still lingering in the air. The lantern would dim, The waves outside would hum, and he would drift into a deep, dream-filled slumber. Perhaps in those dreams, the Krabby Patty took its final shape, guided by the imagination of a crab who longed for something greater. Legends say the recipe did not appear all at once, but piece by piece, like seashells washed ashore over many tides. One night he discovered the importance of a fresh bun. Another night, the crispness of lettuce. Another, the way just the right slice of cheese could melt like golden sunlight. Each discovery was small, but together they built something unforgettable. And as the days passed, his shack became filled with the smell of progress. Neighbors noticed. Passers-by noticed. Even little fish swimming home at night noticed. The aroma drifted through the sea like a lullaby, comforting and curious. Some would later claim they remembered the very night they first smelled it, though none could agree on the exact moments. That is why the origin of the Krabby Patty remains wrapped in mystery, a story too soft and too scattered to pin down, like a dream half-remembered after waking. Still, one thing is certain. Mr. Krabs believed he had discovered something worth protecting. He began to write notes on scraps of paper, scribbling tiny reminders to himself. He would tuck them away in jars and boxes under loose floorboards, not because anyone was after his recipe yet, but because he knew it was valuable, fragile, and rare. In that quiet shack, under the hush of the sea, a legend was forming. And though no crowds had yet gathered, no lines of customers stretched out the door, the heart of the Krabby Patty had been born, a creation made in silence by a crab who sought comfort in the act of cooking and who would one day share it with the world. As wordless whispers of the patty drifted across the seabed, life in Bikini Bottom carried on. Shops opened and closed, jellyfish floated lazily in the meadows, and the tides moved in their endless rhythm. But in his little shack, Eugene Krabs was quietly shaping the future. Every night became a ritual. The lantern was lit, the pan was placed, and the familiar crackle of heat filled the silence. To anyone passing by, it might have seemed repetitive, even ordinary. But for Krabs, each attempt was a small adventure. He was charting unknown waters, not with a ship, but with a spatula. The neighbors, though distant, began to notice. A fisherman who lived 3 reefs away once said he caught the scent of something rich and savory on the night currents. Another claimed he heard Krabs humming sea shanties with unusual joy, his voice softer, lighter, almost hopeful. These little details began to form a quiet legend. That old crab was cooking something new, something magical. Inside the shack, the experiments continued. Some nights were failures, of course. Krabs would take a bite, grimace, and toss the patty into the trash. Too bitter, too mushy, too sharp. But even then, the failure carried no sting. Instead, it was like the ocean teaching him patience, urging him forward with the steady lull of waves. And with every small misstep, there was also progress. Slowly, the patty became more balanced. The bun was softer but sturdier. The lettuce was crisp but not overwhelming. The sauce was subtle, with just enough tang to brighten the flavors. Layer by layer, night after night, the patty grew closer to perfection. Krabs began keeping little jars of ingredients on a shelf above the pan. Some were ordinary sea salt, pepper coral, pressed kelp oil. Others were unusual, collected during his travels. Dried bubbleweed from the far-off reefs, golden flakes of barnacle sugar. Even a pinch of moondust salt gathered by sailors who swore it shimmered under starlight. To most, these were just curiosities, but to Krabs, they were possibilities. And as he experimented, something gentle began to stir in him. It wasn't greed. It wasn't even hunger. It was pride. The kind of pride that comes when you build something with your own claws, something that feels alive with care. One evening, while the waves outside were especially calm, Mr. Krabs prepared a patty with unusual care. He had been saving a small piece of sea cheese, aged and fragrant, wrapped carefully in kelp leaves. Tonight felt like the right night to try it. The shack filled with the smell of sizzling bread and melting cheese. The lantern's flame swayed like it was nodding in approval. Krabs assembled the patty, his movements slow and deliberate, almost ceremonial. When he finally sat down to take a bite, he closed his eyes. The taste was different this time. Not just good, not just comforting, but special. For a moment, the whole ocean seemed to pause with him. The distant creak of the tide faded. The lantern crackled softly. The world became still, as though it too recognized the importance of the moment. And Krabs, sitting there in the dim light, felt something stir in his chest. He knew with quiet certainty that this was no ordinary meal. It was the beginning of something greater. The legend says that after that night, Mr. Krabs stopped seeing the patty as just an experiment. It became his treasure, his secret, his destiny. While others dreamed of gold and jewels, Krabs dreamed of patties stacked high, sizzling on the grill, bringing joy to anyone who tasted them. But the funny thing about destiny is that it often begins in silence. There was no applause, no discovery, no sudden fame, only a crab, a lantern, and the soft sound of sizzling in the night. And perhaps that's what gave the Krabby Patty its true power. It was not rushed. It was not forced. It was allowed to grow in its own time, like a pearl forming slowly inside an oyster, patiently, gently, quietly. When Krabs finally laid his head down that night, he did so with the faint taste of cheese and kelp on his tongue, and the comforting warmth of accomplishment in his heart. Outside, the ocean rocked him to sleep, the waves whispering against the sand like a lullaby written just for him. The first chapter of the Krabby Patty's story had been written, not in ink, not in stone, but in flavor, in memory, and in the dreams of a crab who believed he had found something worth holding on to. The days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months. By now, the little shack where Mr. Krabs lived carried a constant aura of warmth and comfort. The scent of patties lingered in its walls, woven into the wood itself, so that even when the pan was cold, the air still whispered with the promise of flavor. Krabs had begun to keep a small book of notes, nothing elaborate, just scribbles on scraps of parchment, bound together with a bit of string. In it he wrote of his discoveries, the right temperature to toast a bun, the precise way to slice lettuce, the balance between tang and sweetness in a sauce. Each note was a step closer to what we now know as the Krabby Patty. But to him, it was more than a recipe. It was a diary, a record of nights spent alone with only the sound of the ocean to keep him company. Sometimes, when he grew tired, he would pause and look out the window. The sea outside was dark, but never frightening. Jellyfish pulsed gently in the distance, glowing like a lantern's adrift. The sand lay quiet, disturbed only by the soft crawl of a hermit crab or the swish of a sea star moving slowly across the floor. These sights reminded Krabs that life, like cooking, was built from patience. Everything grew in its own time. The patty was becoming something more than food. It was a part of him. He would imagine, in the quiet of his shack, what it might be like if others tasted it. He pictured small families gathering around, children laughing as they held buns too big for their hands. He imagined workers finishing long, weary days and finding comfort in a warm patty. He even imagined friends sharing a meal the conversations flowing as smoothly as the ocean itself. These thoughts filled him with a gentle pride. But he also knew the Patty was delicate, fragile, and precious. He guarded his notes closely. He tucked them away at night, locking them in small boxes or hiding them under loose planks in the floor. Not because anyone had shown interest yet, but because he could feel deep in his shell that this was something worth protecting. The sea has a way of carrying secrets, but it also has a way of keeping them. And so, for a long time, the Krabby Patty remained hidden. Known only to crabs, whispered only to the waves. And yet, even in its secrecy, the Patty began to shape his future. The more he cooked, the more he dreamed. He began to imagine a place not of driftwood and scraps, but of strong walls and bright lights. A place where the smell of patties could drift out onto the street and call to everyone passing by. A place where food was not just eaten, but shared. That dream would one day become the Krusty Krab. But in these early nights, it was just that, a dream. A soft idea rocking gently in his mind like a boat on calm waters. The legend says that sometimes, when Mr. Krabs fell asleep at his table, spatula still in claw, he would dream of that future. In those dreams, the restaurant already existed. He would see SpongeBob at the grill, Squidward at the register, and lines of happy customers stretching out the door. He would wake with a start, the taste of his patty still on his tongue, and whisper to himself, "Someday." Perhaps that is why the Krabby Patty feels timeless, because even before it was shared, it already lived in dreams. As the months passed, crabs perfected the process. The patty had found its voice. It was hearty yet light, simple yet complex, filling yet comforting. Every layer carried meaning: the strength of the bun, the freshness of the vegetables, the richness of the patty itself. And though no one else knew it yet, the foundation of Bikini Bottom's most beloved meal had been set. One night, after finishing another successful creation, Krabs sat quietly in the glow of his lantern. He did not eat the patty right away. Instead, he looked at it carefully, the way one might admire a piece of art. The bread was golden, the lettuce crisp, the sauce shimmering faintly into the dim light. He smiled to himself, feeling that rare mix of contentment and anticipation. Outside, the ocean was calm. The stars above twinkled faintly through the water. The world was at peace. And in that peace, Mr. Krabs whispered to himself, "This is it. This is my treasure." He didn't mean gold. He didn't mean coins or jewels. He meant the patty. The creation he had built with patience, trial, and heart. The Krabby Patty. And so the first chapter of its history closed quietly. No crowds, no celebrations, no fanfare. Only a crab, a lantern, and a patty resting on a wooden table. The sound of the waves outside carried the story into the ocean's memory, where it would wait, gently, until the day came when the world was ready to taste it. The legend of the first Krabby Patty is not about money. It is not about competition. It is about a dream born in silence, in the comfort of a tiny shack, where one crab listened to the ocean, trusted his hands, and created something that would last forever. And if you listen closely, even now, you might hear it too, the faint sizzle of a patty on the grill, echoing softly through the waves. A reminder that sometimes the greatest treasures begin not with noise, but with quiet. The Krabby Patty was no longer just an idea. It had become something real, something treasured. But with treasure comes mystery. And so in time, the story of the patty became inseparable from the legend of its secret formula. What exactly is the secret formula? Is it an ingredient, a method, a whisper spoken at midnight? No one truly knows. And perhaps that is why it has remained a bedtime riddle for so many years, a mystery that drifts through Bikini Bottom like a lullaby sung by the sea itself. The legend begins with Mr. Krabs, sitting alone in his shack, carefully writing notes on scraps of parchment. Each scribble was part of his journey ratios, spices, cooking times. But Krabs was not only recording facts, he was building something far greater. He was weaving a secret that would be protected, cherished, and guarded for as long as he lived. Some say the first time Krabs whispered the formula to himself, it was not in the daylight of business hours, but in the hush of night. He leaned over the table, the lantern flickering softly, and repeated the steps like a prayer, his voice barely audible. Outside, the ocean seemed to listen, the waves slowing just enough to carry his words into the deep. Others imagined the formula not as words at all, but as feelings, the warmth of patience, the comfort of care, the joy of creating something meaningful. How could anyone steal that? How could anyone copy it? Perhaps that is why Plankton, for all his schemes and attempts, never truly succeeded. For the formula, in its truest form, may not exist on paper. It may exist only in the heart of the patty itself. Still, the mystery deepened as the years passed. Mr. Krabs hid his notes in clever places, under loose floorboards, inside bottles, sealed with wax, even buried in tiny chests beneath the sand. He was a crab of treasure, after all, and he treated the formula as the greatest treasure of them all. The ocean itself seemed to conspire in keeping it safe. Sailors spoke of strange currents that carried away anyone who came too close to the shack at night. Fishermen claimed they saw shadows flickering in the windows as though the formula itself was alive, protecting its home. Of course, these may only be stories told to pass the time, but every legend begins with a whisper of truth. And then, of course, there was Plankton. From the very beginning, he had been fascinated by the secret. Where Krabs saw treasure, Plankton saw opportunity. But while Krabs worked in silence, Plankton plotted in frustration. He would creep through the night, slipping across the sand, his single eye glowing faintly in the darkness. He would press his tiny ear to the shack wall, straining to hear the recipe. But each time, he failed. Some say that Plankton's attempts became part of the legend itself, that the formula was so well guarded, so wrapped in mystery, that it lulled even its pursuer into sleep. Imagine it. Plankton sneaking into the shack, crawling up to the table, ready to snatch the secret, only to trip over a shell, tumble into a corner, and drift off. The scent of patties rocking him into slumber. The formula remained untouched, safe as ever. What makes the secret so powerful is not just what it is, but what it represents. To the citizens of Bikini Bottom, the Krabby Patty became more than food. It was comfort. It was community. It was home. The formula, then, is the essence of these feelings. A mystery not to be solved, but to be believed in. Legends grew. Some said the formula contained rare ingredients gathered under the full moon, herbs that shimmered only once a year. Others claimed it was hidden in plain sight, disguised as ordinary seasoning, but infused with something magical only SpongeBob's hands could unlock. And still others whispered that there was no formula at all, that the real secret was love, patience, and the joy of cooking. Each theory, each story added to the mystery. And instead of spoiling it, the uncertainty only deepened the magic. Because sometimes the things we cannot know are the ones that bring us the most comfort. So when you hear the words, the secret formula, let your mind wander. Imagine a locked chest at the bottom of the ocean, guarded by glowing jellyfish. Imagine Mr. Krabs whispering to himself, his words carried away by the tide. Imagine SpongeBob at the grill, smiling softly, as though he knows something no one else does. The truth may never be revealed, and perhaps it should never be, for in the mystery itself lies the magic, the dream, and the gentle comfort of the Krabby Patty. As the years passed, the idea of the secret formula grew larger than the patty itself. Customers would sit in the Krusty Krab, chewing slowly, savoring every bite, and whisper to one another, "What's in it? What makes it taste so good?" No one had the answer, and yet the question itself became part of the magic. Children dreamed of finding scraps of parchment floating in bottles, washed up on the sand, holding the key to the recipe. Old sailors swore they had once smelled the ingredients being mixed late at night, drifting from Krab's shack across the quiet sea, but none could ever prove it. Some believed the formula was kept in a locked safe, hidden deep within the walls of the Krusty Krab. They imagined the heavy clank of metal, the turn of a key, the squeak of hinges opening only when the restaurant was empty. Others thought it wasn't written at all, that Krabs had memorized every word, storing it away in his mind like buried treasure. But the most comforting stories were always the mysterious ones. There's a tale told among Bikini Bottom's children, whispered during sleepovers beneath glowing jellyfish lanterns. They say the secret formula is not a list of ingredients at all, but a lullaby, a soft melody sung by the sea itself passed down to Mr. Krabs in a dream. According to this story, if you listen closely when the waves are calm, you can hear the ocean humming the recipe not in words, but in rhythms of water and bubbles, a song only Krabs understood. Other stories claim the formula is hidden in the stars, that once a year, when the night sky aligns in a particular way, the ingredients are written there in shining constellations. Perhaps Krabs stayed awake one quiet evening, staring up through the glassy water, and copied the recipe from the heavens themselves. And then, of course, there are the more practical myths. Some say the formula includes seaweed harvested under moonlight, or barnacle dust aged for 100 years. Others claim the sauce is mixed with a secret herb that grows only in the deepest part of the ocean, guarded by creatures who never sleep. Yet no matter how many stories swirled, the truth remained just out of reach, and that was the beauty of it. Because in the mystery, everyone found their own answer. Plankton, of course, found only frustration. He believed the secret was a simple recipe, something he could steal and replicate. He tried countless times sneaking into the Krusty Krab under cover of darkness, building machines to pry open safes, disguising himself as customers, even as a fly buzzing around the kitchen. But every attempt ended the same way: failure. Some nights, Plankton would sit on the roof of the chum bucket, staring across the street at the Krusty Krab. The windows glowed warmly, SpongeBob's silhouette dancing cheerfully at the grill. Inside, the patties sizzled, their aroma drifting into the cool night air. And there sat Plankton alone, wondering why he could never succeed. Perhaps, he thought, it was bad luck. Or perhaps the secret was not meant to be stolen at all. Legends grew that the formula itself protected Krabs, that it was not just words on paper, but a living secret, wrapped in magic. Whenever Plankton came close, the recipe shifted, as though hiding itself, like a dream that slips away when you try too hard to remember. And maybe that's exactly what it is, a dream. Something you cannot grab, cannot steal, but can only experience in fleeting moments. Each bite of a Krabby Patty is like catching a piece of that dream, warm, comforting, and fleeting, disappearing as soon as it's gone. This is why many believe the true secret of the formula is not about ingredients. It is about intention, about care, about the gentle patience that Krabs put into those first patties in his little shack when no one else was watching. That care, that sincerity, cannot be bottled or stolen. It can only be felt. And so while Plankton chased the formula endlessly, the rest of Bikini Bottom learned to simply enjoy the mystery, to sit in the Krusty Krab, patty in hand, and let the taste wash over them, to wonder without needing an answer, because sometimes it is the wondering itself that makes something magical. The formula, in its silence, became like a bedtime story. Everyone knew it existed. No one knew the truth. And in that gentle not knowing, there was comfort, the same comfort as drifting off to sleep with a question you never need to answer. For the townsfolk of Bikini Bottom, the mystery of the secret formula became something more than just a puzzle. It became a tradition. Families would sit at dinner, patty in hand, and ask each other playful questions. What do you think the secret is? Some would say, it's jellyfish jelly. Others swore it was just love. Children would argue, laugh, and in the end, agree that maybe not knowing made the patty taste even better. There's a certain comfort in mystery. It gives the imagination room to wander, especially on long, quiet nights when the tide is calm and the streets of Bikini Bottom glow with lantern light. Many customers found themselves gazing at their plates, drifting into daydreams as they wondered if perhaps they had come close to guessing the secret without realizing it. And then there was SpongeBob. For him, the Krabby Patty was not just food. It was a purpose. He stood at the grill every day, apron tied snug, spatula in hand, as if he were guarding not only the recipe but also the spirit behind it. SpongeBob never asked Mr. Krabs what the formula was, not once. For him, it didn't matter. He believed that Patty's magic wasn't just written down in words, but was alive in the act of cooking itself. When SpongeBob cooked, he sang. He flipped each patty with care, humming gentle tunes as if soothing the food into perfection. Many customers swore the burgers tasted different when SpongeBob was at the grill, as though his joy infused every bite. If there was a secret, perhaps SpongeBob was unknowingly part of it. His happiness, a seasoning no one else could provide. Others believed Squidward, despite his boredom, played a role too. His clarinet music, drifting from the register when the restaurant was quiet, seemed to wrap itself around the patties like a lullaby. Perhaps the formula thrived on this unlikely harmony. SpongeBob's joy, Squidward's reluctant patience, and Krabs' unshakable pride. Together they created a rhythm, a balance that gave the patty its power. Of course, not everyone saw it that way. Scholars of the deep-sea professors, explorers, and self-proclaimed food historians began to write papers on the formula. They speculated on ingredients, chemical reactions, and ancient culinary traditions. But no matter how many theories they published, none could explain why the Krabby Patty held such sway over the heart. One old professor once remarked, "It is not the ingredients we taste, but the story itself." And perhaps he was right, because every patty was more than just food. It was a continuation of a legend. Legends, after all, are like gentle tides. They shift, they change, but they always return to the shore, carrying with them a sense of wonder. The formula's story became like a lullaby told again and again, reshaped with every telling, never the same twice. Plankton, meanwhile, remained restless. He tinkered late into the night, his lab filled with bubbling concoctions and glowing liquids. He built machines to analyze scraps of bun, droplets of grease, and crumbs left behind on plates. Yet nothing ever gave him the answer. His frustration echoed across the street. But the Krusty Krab remained untouched, glowing with its quiet warmth. Some nights, however, even Plankton grew tired of his scheming. He would wander outside, look up at the stars through the water's surface, and wonder if maybe the secret wasn't meant for him. Maybe the formula wasn't something you could hold in your hand at all. Maybe it was like the stars always shining, always out of reach, but beautiful precisely because of that. And so the secret formula became something bigger than Mr. Krabs, bigger than the Krusty Krab. It became part of the town itself, a piece of folklore woven into every conversation, every memory, every shared meal. There were rumors, too, whispered late at night in hushed tones. Some said the formula was alive, not literally, but in spirit. That every time someone took a bite of a Krabby Patty, a little piece of happiness was passed on, like a spark leaping from one heart to another. And isn't that the most magical idea of all? That the formula doesn't just feed the stomach, but feeds the soul. That it comforts the weary, lifts the sad, and fills the quiet spaces of life with warmth. This is why the Krabby Patty is more than food. It is a story told through taste, a story that changes with every bite. And the secret formula, whatever it may be, is not a code to be cracked, but a mystery meant to be lived. And so the town carried on, content to wonder. The formula stayed locked away, or perhaps it stayed everywhere, in every grill flip patty, in every laugh shared across the counter, in every satisfied sigh after the last bite. And so as the night stretched on in Bikini Bottom, the legend of the secret formula continued to ripple through the ocean like a gentle current. Everyone carried their own version of the story, yet no two tales were ever the same. Some preferred the practical myths, a pinch of something rare, a dash of something timeless. Others leaned into the fantastical, a whisper from the sea, a melody from the stars, but in every telling, the formula was never just a recipe. It was something more, something softer. SpongeBob, in his cheerful innocence, embodied this truth better than anyone. He never questioned, never demanded answers. To him, the patties were already perfect. When asked if he knew the formula, he'd simply giggle, his eyes wide and sparkling, and say, "I just know how to make people happy." And perhaps that was closer to the truth than he realized. Because the formula seemed to thrive not in secrecy, but in sharing. Each time SpongeBob slid a tray across the counter, each time Squidward rang the register with a tired sigh, and each time Mr. Krabs counted his coins with a proud grin, the magic unfolded again. A rhythm of life, small and ordinary, yet glowing with meaning. The people of Bikini Bottom came to accept that the formula was not something they could touch. Instead, it was something they could feel. In the laughter of children biting into their first patty. In the comfort of friends gathering late at night, splitting a basket of fries beneath the warm glow of the Krusty Krab's lanterns. In the quiet relief of sailors who had braved long voyages and returned to taste something that reminded them of home. That was the secret. Not the paper, not the ink, not the ingredients, but the comforts. The formula lived in the way it soothed the soul. Plankton, of course, never stopped trying, yet even he, in his most silent moments, must have felt the truth tugging at him. For how could a recipe on its own explain so much joy? How could numbers and measurements capture something so boundless? Late at night, when his experiments fizzled out and the lab grew quiet, perhaps even Plankton wondered whether the formula wasn't just a mirror reflecting what each person needed most. In this way, the mystery endured, and in enduring, it became eternal. Some said the secret would never be revealed, not because Krabs was too stubborn, but because revealing it would break the spell. To know the answer would be to end the dream. And so the ocean itself seemed to protect it, shrouding it in endless layers of curiosity and wonder. For in truth, mysteries are not meant to be solved. They are meant to be lived. They are the stories that carry us through the night, soothing us, rocking us gently like the waves. And the secret formula is perhaps the greatest mystery of all one, that continues to whisper through the sea, carried in every sizzling patty, every satisfied smile, every soft sigh of contentment. And when the Krusty Krab finally closed for the night, when SpongeBob had scrubbed the grill until it shone, when Squidward trudged home with tired steps, and when Mr. Krabs locked the door with a jingling of keys, the secret remained where it always had been. Safe, untouchable, alive. Safe not in a vault, but in the hearts of those who believed. Alive not on paper, but in the warmth of every bite. And untouchable, because it was never really about ingredients at all. It was about the dream of something more. And so, as you drift now, letting your eyes grow heavy, perhaps you can feel it too, that same mystery, that same gentle comfort. The ocean whispers softly outside, and the glow of the Krusty Krab's lanterns fades into the night. The formula rests quietly, waiting for tomorrow, waiting for the next story, waiting for the next dream. And like all the best mysteries, it does not demand an answer. It only asks you to wonder. And in that wondering, to rest. Long before the Krusty Krab became the bustling heart of Bikini Bottom, before the sizzling sound of patties filled the air every hour of the day, there was only a small, quiet building on a lonely street. Its sign was fresh, painted with bold red letters that proudly announced its name, the Krusty Krab. Mr. Krabs, with his sleeves rolled up and his claws polished for good luck, stood proudly at the door. He had worked tirelessly to bring his dream to life, an establishment where a simple meal could fill more than just bellies. He believed it could fill hearts. But on that very first morning, as the doors creaked open, for the first time, the restaurant was silent. The tables were spotless, the floor freshly mopped. The grill gleamed, waiting for its first test. Outside, the water was calm, the early glow of sunlight filtering down through the sea, casting a golden haze across the streets. And yet, there were no customers. Not at first. Krabs straightened his hat, cleared his throat, and tried to hum a tune to calm his nerves. He knew patience was key. A business, after all, did not bloom overnight. Still, he couldn't help but feel a little pang of worry. Would anyone come? Would anyone care for his creation, this strange new burger he had labored over, perfecting in the quiet of his shack for so many sleepless nights? It was then that the door opened with a slow creak, and the very first customer stepped inside. She was an elderly fish, her fins a little wrinkled from time, her movements gentle and slow. She wore a wide-brimmed hat and carried a basket of knitting. The moment she saw Krabs behind the counter, she smiled warmly. "Are you open yet, young man?" she asked in a voice soft as seagrass swaying in the tide. Krabs nearly tripped over himself with excitement. "Aye, ma'am. You've just become me very first customer," he declared, puffing out his chest with pride. The old fish chuckled, setting down her basket at one of the small tables. "Well, then, I suppose I'll have to try whatever it is you're serving." And so, with careful hands, Krabs cooked the very first Krabby Patty ever sold in the Krusty Krab. The grill hissed softly as the patty sizzled, filling the room with a savory aroma that seemed to wrap itself around the walls. Krabs slid it onto a fresh bun, added the toppings just so, and placed it on a plate with trembling claws. When the old woman took her first bite, silence filled the restaurant. She chewed slowly, thoughtfully, and then her eyes widened. A smile spread across her face, and she let out a soft sigh of delight. "Oh, my," she whispered. This tastes like home." Those words struck Krabs deeper than any praise he had ever received. He had hoped the patty would satisfy hunger, yes, but this was something greater. He had created comfort. The old woman finished her meal quietly, thanked Krabs with a kind nod, and left with a promise to return. And though it had only been one customer, Krabs felt as though his dream had already begun to come true. Not long after, more curious faces began to appear. Word had spread quickly, carried like bubbles through the current. A pair of young sailors, still smelling of salt and sea foam, wandered in. They were rough around the edges, tired from weeks at sea, and skeptical of the little restaurant. But once they tasted the patties, their laughter filled the air. They clapped Krabs on the back, declaring it the best meal they'd had in years. Later that afternoon, a group of children burst through the doors, coins jangling in their pockets. Their eyes widened at the sight of the simple menu, and they giggled with excitement as they placed their orders. When their patties arrived, they ate with the unrestrained joy only children could show. Crumbs scattering across the table, laughter bubbling up like music. Each new customer added to the Krusty Krab's story. Each bite carried the promise of something lasting. And as the day went on, Krabs realized that the restaurant was no longer just his. It belonged to everyone who walked through those doors. By nightfall, as Krabs wiped down the counters and the grill gave off the last faint wisp of smoke, he looked around the empty dining room with pride. The chairs were slightly askew, the tables dotted with crumbs, and the air still carried the lingering scent of patties. It was no longer a silent, lonely place. It was alive. And so began the tale of the first customers, ordinary folk, who stepped into a brand-new restaurant and unknowingly became part of a legend. They would tell their friends, who would tell their families, and slowly, the Krusty Krab would grow into something greater than Krabs himself could have imagined. For every patty eaten was not just food. It was the start of a memory. The morning after that very first day, Mr. Krabs woke before the sun's rays filtered down into Bikini Bottom. He polished the grill, straightened every chair, and made sure the sign outside gleamed. The pride of yesterday still warmed him, but he knew one day it was not enough. He wondered, would they come back, or had it all been a passing moment? But as the door was opened, his doubts vanished. The old woman returned just as she had promised. She entered quietly, her knitting basket under one arm, and sat at the same table as before. She ordered the same patty, though this time she added a cup of tea. She didn't say much, but the contented look on her face as she ate told Krabs everything he needed to know. Not long after, the two sailors stumbled in again. They were a little less weary, a little less skeptical, but no less hungry. This time, they asked if they could have their patties with extra sauce. Krabs obliged, and their satisfied cheers filled the air once again. They slapped the table, laughed until the walls shook, and promised to tell their fellow crewmates. And indeed, by the afternoon, more sailors came. Their boots clomped across the freshly mopped floor, their deep voices booming with curiosity. Some ordered 2 patties at once, unable to resist the smell that hung in the air. For Krabs, it was both a challenge and a triumph, the grill sputtering and sizzling under the weight of so many orders, his claws working faster than they ever had before. But perhaps the most memorable customers that day were the children. They came in pairs and groups, coins clinking in their little purses, their eyes shining with excitement. Some had heard about the patties from their parents, others from whispers among friends. For them, the Krusty Krab was not just a place to eat. It was a place to gather, to share stories, to laugh until their sides ached. Crabs would watch as they leaned close over their meals, inventing tales about the secret ingredient they were certain they had discovered. One boy insisted it was moonlit kelp, while another swore it was jellyfish sparkles. Their imaginations wove the Krabby Patty into something magical, and Krabs smiled quietly to himself, letting them believe whatever they wished. Each customer seemed to leave something behind, even if only in spirit. The laughter of the sailors lingered in the air. The quiet joy of the old woman filled the corners of the room, and the bubbling chatter of the children seemed to echo long after they were gone. The Krusty Krab, once a silent building, now pulsed with life. On the third day, Krabs was surprised by a new kind of customer. A stern-looking businessman with a briefcase entered the restaurant. His fins were polished, his tie neat, and his eyes sharp with scrutiny. He sat at a table, ordered one patty, and ate it slowly, as if he were judging every single bite. Krabs waited nervously behind the counter, polishing an already spotless glass. Finally, the businessman finished and dabbed his mouth with a napkin and stood. He placed a single coin on the counter and said in a voice both serious and soft, "This will change Bikini Bottom." And with that, he left. Krabs stood frozen for a moment, stunned. The words replayed in his mind like the echo of a distant bell. This will change Bikini Bottom. He knew then that the Krabby Patty was more than just food. It was already becoming part of something larger, a part of the town itself. As the days stretched into weeks, the first wave of customers continued to return, bringing with them friends, neighbors, and coworkers. The old woman often brought other elders from her knitting circle, who would sit for hours after their meals, sipping tea and chatting quietly. The sailors came in groups, rowdy but cheerful, filling the restaurant with stories of faraway seas. The children grew bolder, pooling their coins together so they could order a tray of patties to share among themselves. The Krusty Krab was no longer just a new building with a fresh sign. It had become a meeting place, a haven, a second home. And through it all, Krabs watched with quiet pride. He still counted his coins carefully at the end of each night. Some habits never changed, but there was more in his eyes than greed. There was a glow of satisfaction, of belonging. For the first time in his life, he felt he had given something back to the community, even if it came in the form of a simple sandwich. The first customers of the Krusty Krab may not have known it at the time, but they were writing history with every bite. It didn't take long for the ripples of the Krabby Patty's arrival to stretch beyond the little street where the Krusty Krab stood. Just as the tide carries whispers from shore to shore, so too did the stories of those first customers begin to spread. The old woman, gentle and soft-spoken, carried her knitting to community gatherings. There, over cups of warm tea and hushed conversation, she would tell her friends about the young entrepreneur with the claws and his magical burger. Her friends listened, skeptical at first, but her glowing smile convinced them to give it a try. Soon, whole groups of elders were making their way to the Krusty Krab, turning it into a small but steady tradition lunch after morning knitting, with tea and a patty waiting to warm their spirits. The sailors carried the tale even farther. When their ships pulled into distant reefs and ports, they told anyone who would listen about the tiny restaurant in Bikini Bottom where they had eaten the best meal of their lives. They exaggerated, of course, as sailors often do. Some claimed the patties gave them strength to row through storms. Others swore the flavor stayed with them for weeks, like an invisible anchor to home. Their tales, whether true or stretched by saltwater imagination, brought curious travelers into Bikini Bottom, eager to taste for themselves. The children, meanwhile, turned the Krusty Krab into something close to a legend. On playgrounds and under jellyfish lanterns, they invented stories about the patty's secret powers. Some claimed a single bite made them swim faster. Others declared the sauce could make you dream of magical lands. The more they shared, the bigger the legend grew, until even those who had never set foot inside the Krusty Krab felt like they had. Word of mouth is the oldest kind of advertisement, and in those early days, it was the truest magic the Krabby Patty had. No posters, no jingles, no grand announcements. Just the voices of those who had tasted it, carrying their joy into every corner of the ocean. One evening, a group of travelers arrived at the Krusty Krab. They weren't locals, but drifters' fish who had heard the whispers from sailors far and wide. They approached cautiously, unsure if the tales could possibly be true. Krabs welcomed them warmly, though he couldn't help but puff his chest with pride as he served them their first patties. The moment they bit in, silence filled the room, broken only by the sizzling of the grill. Then came the smile, slow, genuine, glowing like lanterns against the night. One of the travelers leaned back, let out a long sigh, and murmured, "This tastes like a memory I didn't know I had." For Krabs, those words were as valuable as gold. It meant his food was not just satisfying hunger, but awakening something deeper, something everyone could feel but no one could explain. The businessman who had once declared, "This will change Bikini Bottom," returned as well. This time he brought colleagues. They came in press suits, briefcases in hand, speaking in sharp tones. Yet as soon as they tasted the patties, the sharpness faded. Their voices softened, their shoulders relaxed. Some even laughed. Business meetings turned into meals, and the Krusty Krab became a place where deals were struck over shared baskets of fries. And so, day by day, customer by customer, the Krusty Krab became more than a restaurant. It became a thread in the fabric of the community. Everyone who walked through those doors added to its growing legend. Whether they were a lonely elder, a weary sailor, a playful child, or a serious professional. Krabs watched this all with a quiet satisfaction he rarely showed. At night, when the chairs were stacked and the lanterns dimmed, he would sit by the counter, claws resting on the wood, and think of those first customers. Each of them had given his dream life. Each of them had taken a risk on something new. And in doing so, they had built something far greater than even Krabs had imagined. The Krusty Krab was no longer just his restaurant. It belonged to the people who believed in it, the ones who spread its story like the sea spreads the tide. And the legend of the first customers, humble, ordinary folk, became the foundation of the great empire that was to come. As the weeks turned into months, the Krusty Krab became something far more than a little shack with a grill inside. To the residents of Bikini Bottom, it grew into a second home, a place where stories were exchanged, laughter echoed, and weary souls found comfort. But all of that could be traced back to those first brave customers who stepped across the threshold when the smell of sizzling patties was still new and untested. The old woman who had once walked in on a quiet afternoon became almost like a grandmother to the restaurant itself. She brought her friends faithfully, sometimes knitting by the window as she sipped her kelp tea and nibbled on her Krabby Patty. Her presence reminded everyone that the Krusty Krab was a safe, welcoming place, no matter your age or station in life. To this day, Krabs would later say that her smile was worth more than any treasure chest. The sailors, true to their wandering ways, continued to spread the word across the seas. Some returned months later, weary from their voyages, with salt in their gills and hunger in their bellies. They would sit down, order patties, and exhale with the kind of relief that only comes when you find a taste of home after being away too long. Krabs would grin, clapping them on the back, saying, "The grill's always waiting for you, lads." and they in turn carried that warmth back out to the farthest reaches of the ocean. The children never stopped coming either. They grew up with Krabby Patties as part of their lives after school snacks, birthday treats, or simply a reward after a long day of jellyfishing. They carved their names into the tables, built little forts out of condiment packets, and sometimes fell asleep in the booths when their playtime stretched too late. To them, the Krusty Krab wasn't just a restaurant. It was magic made real, a place where their imagination seemed to taste better with every bite. And then there were the travelers, those who had heard rumors, whispers carried across currents and reefs. They began to arrive more often, guided not by maps, but by tales of flavor too powerful to be ignored. They brought with them coins, stories of their own lands, and curiosity about the little shack with the red sign. Many of them left with more than a full stomach. They left with memories etched into their hearts, and stories they too would share in places far beyond Bikini Bottom. As the Krusty Krab grew, Krabs never forgot those first customers. He would often tell SpongeBob years later about how nervous he had been the day he opened the doors, how he had doubted if anyone would come in at all, and how those first few faces changed everything. "You see, lad," he'd say, his eyes softening, "a restaurant ain't just built on wood and nails. It's built on the souls that sit inside it. Those first customers that gave this place its heartbeat." SpongeBob, wide-eyed and dreamy, would listen as if hearing a bedtime story. And in a way, it was. Because the tale of the Krusty Krab's first customers is not only a story of food, but of connection. It's a reminder that sometimes greatness begins not with a grand announcement or a bold gesture, but with a handful of ordinary people willing to take a chance on something new. The legend of the first Krusty Krab customers became almost myth-like as years passed. Some claim the first patty eaten there was blessed by the sea itself. Others insisted that those early diners had unknowingly set into motion a chain of events that would forever change Bikini Bottom. In truth, both were right in their own way. Because without them, without the old woman's gentle faith, the sailors' stories, the children's laughter, and the travelers' curiosity, the Krabby Patty might have remained just a recipe cooked in a small shack, forgotten with the tide. Instead, it became a legend, echoing through generations, inspiring song, stories, and dreams. On quiet nights, when the last lantern was dimmed and the sea was hushed, Mr. Krabs would sometimes sit alone at a booth, claws folded, and remember. He would picture the faces of those first customers smiling, curious and hungry, and whisper a quiet thanks into the stillness. And though the Krusty Krab would go on to see countless customers, each one adding their own story to its walls, it was always those first few who carried the weight of the legend. For they were not just the first to eat the patty, they were the first to believe in it. And in that belief, they gave birth to the Krabby Patty's true magic. In the quiet corners of Bikini Bottom, when the ocean currents slow and the streets grow still, there is a hush that falls over the town. It's in these hushed hours that whispers come alive. Whispers of old stories, little legends, and curious theories passed from one sea creature to another. And perhaps no topic is more wrapped in mystery, wonder, and debate than the one that has always fascinated fans and locals alike: the myths and theories of the Krabby Patty. The Krabby Patty, as we've already seen through its history, is more than just food. It is a cultural icon, a source of comfort, a symbol of friendship. But to some, it is also something larger, a mystery waiting to be unraveled. When the restaurant lights dim and the chairs are stacked on the tables, the questions begin to float around like drifting seaweed. What exactly makes the Krabby Patty so irresistible? Why does its taste never fade, never disappoint, never feel ordinary? For every satisfied customer who takes a bite and smiles, there is another voice somewhere in Bikini Bottom offering a theory. Some theories are playful, others sound almost scientific, and still others feel like bedtime stories, dreamy, strange, and full of possibility. Tonight we will wander through these myths as though we are walking down quiet streets, lit only by the soft glow of lanterns. Each theory will pass by like a glowing bubble in the dark water, drifting, floating, waiting for us to notice before it drifts away again. One of the oldest and most popular myths in Bikini Bottom is that the Krabby Patty contains a magical sea herb known only to Mr. Krabs. Some say this herb grows deep in hidden kelp forests, places where sunlight barely touches the ocean floor. According to legend, Mr. Krabs once stumbled upon this forest during his adventurous younger days, when he was searching for treasures of gold and silver. What he found instead was a soft patch of glowing kelp that seemed to shimmer with golden sparkles. He clipped just a handful, brought it home, and discovered that when he added it to a simple patty, the flavor became extraordinary. This myth is often told to children as a bedtime story. Parents describe Mr. Krabs carefully guarding the last of the magical kelp, adding just a trace into each batch of patties so the magic would never run out. Children listening often drift to sleep imagining glowing forests and golden herbs swirling gently in the tide. Of course, no one has ever proven that this kelp exists. But that is the nature of myths. They do not need proof, only imagination. Another theory that often stirs curiosity is far more practical, though no less mysterious. Some say the secret of the Krabby Patty is not in any magical ingredient at all, but in the way it is cooked. According to this theory, SpongeBob's dedication and joy while cooking infused the patties with something beyond flavor. His laughter, his optimism, and his endless care seep into every burger. Each flip of the spatula, each sprinkle of seasoning, each little hum he sings at the grill is thought to add a hidden layer of warmth. To those who believe this theory, the Krabby Patty is not just food, but a reflection of SpongeBob himself. The moment someone takes a bite, they are tasting happiness, tasting comforts, tasting joy in its purest form. Perhaps that's why even customers who feel lonely or sad often walk away from the Krusty Krab with lighter hearts. If this theory is true, then the recipe for the Krabby Patty isn't written on paper. It's written in SpongeBob's heart. Then there are theories that lean into the more peculiar, the slightly eerie, the ones that make you raise your eyebrows and smile nervously in the dark. One such story claims that the Krabby Patty's flavor comes from a secret pact with the ocean itself. In this telling, Mr. Krabs made a deal long ago, not with the customers or business partners, but with the sea. He promised to honor the ocean's riches, to always serve his community. And in return, the ocean blessed his creation with flavor that could never be imitated. Whether or not one believes this theory, it holds a kind of dreamy weight. Imagine the ocean itself, vast and ancient, lending its power to a small, humble burger shack in Bikini Bottom. Imagine every wave that brushes against the Krusty Krab, carrying with it not just water and salt, but a quiet reminder of that pact. It is the kind of story that gives the Krabby Patty a timeless, almost sacred aura. And still, there are lighter, sillier myths. Some believe the patties are addictive because they contain just a touch of jellyfish jelly, the sweet, glowing nectar. SpongeBob sometimes collects from jellyfish fields. Others say the patties are shaped in such a perfect circle that they align with the rhythm of the tides, making every bite feel harmonious. Some even whisper that the patties sing a soundless song, a tune only the soul can hear. All of these theories, magical herbs, SpongeBob's joy, ancient packs, glowing jellyfish jellies swirl together like currents meeting under the moonlight. None are proven, none are official, but each holds its place in the gentle imagination of Bikini Bottom. And so, as the ocean grows darker and the glow of the Krusty Krab sign flickers in the night, these myths remind us of something important, that sometimes the mysteries of life are not meant to be solved. They are meant to be wondered about, shared, and dreamed upon. While the locals of Bikini Bottom have their own beloved myths, the Krabby Patty's mystery has always reached further. Travelers passing through town often leave with their own stories, adding layers to the web of theories that surround the burger. Each tale grows a little in the telling, like ripples widening after a pebble drops into the sea. One curious rumor comes from sailors who claim that the Krabby Patty has a secret seasoning made from the sea breeze itself. They swear that when the grill flares and the smoke rises into the night, it captures the very essence of the tides. According to these wandering storytellers, Mr. Krabs bottles this captured breeze and sprinkles it into the mix. Perhaps it's just a sailor's fancy, a dreamy exaggeration after too many nights under the stars, but the idea has a charm to it, that with every bite of a Krabby Patty, one can taste the ocean's eternal breath. Another popular theory floats among schoolchildren, whispered in hushed tones during recess. They insist that the patties are made using ancient sea crystals buried deep beneath the Krusty Krab. These crystals, glowing faintly, are said to release energy when heated. SpongeBob, in this telling, unknowingly places a sliver into every burger. The result is not only flavor, but a surge of warmth, happiness, and belonging. The adults smile when they hear the story, yet part of them can't help but wonder. After all, the ocean floor hides countless mysteries, and who is to say what really lies beneath the foundation of the Krusty Krab? Then, of course, there are Plankton's theories. No one spends more time obsessing over the Krabby Patty than the tiny owner of the chum bucket. To Plankton, the patty is not food, it is a puzzle. He has declared to anyone who would listen that the secret formula must involve some impossible ingredient, rare barnacle shavings, volcanic pepper, or even enchanted seafoam. His theories often sound absurd, but in his frustration, he has convinced himself that the formula cannot be ordinary. How else could a simple burger hold such sway over the entire town? Some nights, Plankton sits in his empty restaurant, muttering to himself about the possibilities. He scribbles diagrams, equations, and guesses onto napkins. He dreams of cracking the code, yet each failed attempt only deepens the mystery. And in a way, Plankton's endless theorizing has added to the myth itself. His obsession has made the Krabby Patty not only delicious, but legendary. For if even a scientific mind cannot solve it, then surely it must be something greater than science. Beyond Bikini Bottom, legends grow stranger still. There are tales told in distant reef towns of a golden patty, a burger so perfect that whoever eats it will know eternal happiness. Some say Mr. Krabs hides it away, serving it only once in a generation. Others claim SpongeBob has never revealed it, waiting for the right moment or the right customer. These myths sound fantastical, yet they carry a soothing quality, like a bedtime tale spun for comfort. And then there is perhaps the most haunting theory of all, that the Krabby Patty is not about what it contains, but about what it does not. Some whisper that it holds an absence and emptiness that calls to the eater's own heart, filling it with whatever they need most. To a lonely soul, it tastes like companionship, To the weary, it tastes like rest. To the joyful, it amplifies their happiness. The patty, in this retelling, is a mirror reflecting not flavor alone, but the deepest desires of the person who eats it. Of course, such an idea cannot be proven, yet it explains something that no ingredient list could. Why else would every customer describe the Krabby Patty differently? Why would it mean so many things to so many people? Perhaps, like a dream, it shapes itself around the sleeper, or in this case, the eater. Even the way the patty is served adds to the myth. The squeaky floors, the faint smell of the ocean, the warm light of lanterns inside the Krusty Krab all become part of the experience. Many argued that the burger alone might not be magical, but the setting, the ritual, the history surrounding it breathe life into every bite. It is a theory that blends fact and fantasy, reminding us that sometimes the environment is as important as the food itself. And yet, through all these myths, sea herbs, jellyfish jelly, ancient crystals, golden patties, and enchanted absences, one truth rises again and again. The Krabby Patty, whatever its secret, inspires not only hunger, but imagination. It makes people wonder. It makes them storytellers. It makes them dream. And perhaps that is its greatest power. Not the flavor, not the formula, but the way it creates myths in the first place. After all, what is a legend but a story that refuses to fade? As the tide drifts deeper into night, the myths surrounding the Krabby Patty take on a softer, almost magical tone. Some of these stories are so tender that they sound more like lullabies than legends, passed quietly from one generation to the next. They are told not to solve the mystery, but to give it a gentle place in the imagination. One such tale is the story of the Moonlit Patty. According to this myth, the Krabby Patty owes its perfection to the moon. It is said that on the night the first patty was created, a full moon glowed above the ocean, casting its silver light across the water. That light touched the patty as it sizzled, soaking it with a blessing that would last forever. Ever since, the moon has been a silent guardian of the recipe. Some even say that if you eat a Krabby Patty under the light of a full moon, it will taste just a little sweeter, as though the moon is still sharing its quiet gift. There are also myths tied closely to SpongeBob himself. His friends often wonder if his joyful spirit is the secret all along. Patrick, in particular, once suggested in his simple, dreamy way that maybe the patties taste good because SpongeBob loves them more than anyone else. If you love something enough, Patrick once said, it'll love you back. To Patrick, each patty is not just food, but a hug cooked onto a bun. His theory, though playful, carries a warmth that feels true. After all, who could doubt the love SpongeBob pours into his work? Squidward, of course, has his own version. With his usual sigh, he has claimed more than once that the patties only taste good because everyone else is too simple to notice. Yet even Squidward's dismissive remarks seem to hide a quiet acknowledgement. Deep down, he knows the patty carries something he cannot explain, something he will never admit to. Perhaps even in his cynicism, Squidward senses the magic, though he keeps it buried under layers of sarcasm. Other stories drift from the elders of Bikini Bottom. Grandparents tell their grandchildren that the Krabby Patty was born not just from ingredients, but from gratitude. They say Mr. Krabs, though driven by money, once paused and gave thanks to the ocean for providing him with food, shelter, and livelihood. The moment of gratitude became part of the patty itself, echoing in every bite. These bedtime stories encourage little ones to appreciate the things they have, reminding them that sometimes the greatest flavors in life come from thankfulness. A more whimsical myth tells of the jellyfish chorus. In this version, SpongeBob's grill hums with energy because jellyfish sing silently nearby. Their buzzing, their floating rhythms, blend with the crackle of the grill. Customers don't hear it with their ears, but with their hearts. Every Krabby Patty then carries the faint hum of the jellyfish, a lullaby woven to its flavor. Those who believe this theory swear that they feel calmer after eating, as though the ocean itself has sung them to peace. Then there are the superstitions. Some say you should never eat the very first patty cooked at dawn. It belongs to the sea. If you take it, your luck may sour. Others say that the very last patty of the night carries special strength, especially for travelers far from home. And still others believe that if you close your eyes while taking your first bite, you may glimpse a dream of the patty's origins, a vision of Mr. Krabs in his old shack, or SpongeBob flipping burgers with a smile. Each superstition, though small, gives the Krabby Patty an aura of ritual. Eating one feels less like a meal and more like participating in something ancient, something quietly sacred. One of the gentlest myths of all is the family patty theory. This story suggests that the Krabby Patty changes ever so slightly depending on who you eat it with. Shared with friends, it feels light and joyful. Shared with family, it feels warm and safe. Shared alone, it feels comforting, as though the patty itself is keeping you company. This idea has made the patty more than food. It has turned it into a symbol of togetherness, something that bonds people across generations. Even SpongeBob himself, when asked about the recipe, often smiles and shrugs. "It's just love," he sometimes says, his voice cheerful yet sincere. And in that moment, one wonders if the simplest theory of all might be the closest to the truth. These myths, whether whispered by sailors, dreamed up by children, or passed down by families, all blend together into something soft and enduring. They are less about uncovering facts and more about creating a gentle tapestry of wonder. Each theory is a thread woven carefully into the larger story of the Krabby Patty. And so, when the Krusty Krab grows quiet at night, the walls seem to hold these stories. The scent of the grill carries them. The flickering sign outside hums with them. And perhaps, if one listens closely enough, the very ocean murmurs them back, a bedtime chorus of myths that cradle the history of the patty in gentle mystery. As we drift deeper into the quiet waters of the night, the myths and theories surrounding the Krabby Patty begin to settle into something larger than stories. They become part of a rhythm, the slow, steady hum of a community that finds comfort in wondering. Each tale, whether silly or sacred, whether whispered by a child or muttered by an old sailor, adds its own glow to the mystery. And in the stillness, that glow feels almost like a nightlight in the dark sea. One final story often told in hushed voices is that of the eternal grill. This myth claims that somewhere beneath the Krusty Krab, a flame has burned since the day the first patty was cooked. Invisible to the eye, unheard to the ear, it burns steadily, never fading. Every Krabby Patty, then, is kissed by this eternal fire, giving it warmth that cannot be copied. Some dreamers even say that when the restaurant closes for the night and SpongeBob scrubs down the grill, the hidden flame continues below, glowing faintly like a heartbeat beneath the floorboards. There is also a theory that connects the patties to the dreams of Bikini Bottom. According to this gentle idea, the Krabby Patty draws flavor from the collective dreams of those who live nearby. When people dream of joy, of laughter, of home, that energy flows into the patties. This is why they taste so different from anything else. They are, in essence, the edible form of a town's happiness, a food woven from the hopes and dreams of an entire community. To some, these ideas sound far-fetched, but when spoken softly at night, they feel less like theories and more like lullabies, comforting in their impossibility. The Krabby Patty, in this way, is not just food. It is a dream that keeps repeating itself, a dream you can taste. And yet there is one more myth worth mentioning, one that perhaps explains why no single story ever feels complete. It is called the mystery theory. This theory suggests that the true magic of the Krabby Patty is not in knowing, but in not knowing. That the unanswered question is the very thing that gives it power. For if the formula were revealed, if the secret were written down and shared openly, the wonder would vanish. The patty would stop being a legend and become just another recipe. The mystery theory tells us that sometimes the most precious things in life are the ones we cannot fully explain. The things that invite us to keep dreaming, to keep imagining, to keep telling stories long after the lights have gone out. When customers gather at the Krusty Krab, they bring these myths with them. Some laugh at the silly ones, some smile at the magical ones, and some tuck them away quietly like a secret treasure. And though they all leave with full bellies, they also leave with something else, the comfort of carrying a mystery. For SpongeBob, the mystery has never needed solving. To him, every day at the grill is enough. The sizzle of the patty, the aroma filling the room, the joy on the faces of customers, this is his treasure, and he asks for no more. Mr. Krabs, of course, guards the formula carefully, but perhaps even he understands in his own way that it is the legend of the secret as much as the secret itself that keeps the Krabby Patty alive. And so, as the myths drift together like glowing plankton in the tide, we are left with a simple truth. The Krabby Patty is more than bread, lettuce, tomato, and patty. It is more than herbs, more than jellyfish jelly, more than moonlight or crystals. It is a story that has been told again and again, reshaped by every voice that shares it. A story that comforts, delights, and lulls us gently into wonder. In the silence of night, when the Krusty Krab is dark and the streets of Bikini Bottom are still, the myths remain. They float through the water like soft bubbles, waiting for the next listener, the next dreamer, the next sleepy soul ready to drift into slumber. And maybe, just maybe, that is the greatest secret of all, that the Krabby Patty was never meant to be solved, only savored one bite, one dream, one story at a time. So as you rest tonight, imagine the myths swirling gently around you. Picture the moonlit patty glowing silver, the jellyfish chorus humming softly, the eternal grill burning quietly beneath the floor. Imagine SpongeBob flipping patties with a smile, Plankton scribbling furiously in the dark, and Mr. Krabs clutching the secret formula to his chest. Each one a piece of the greater mystery, each one a lullaby in its own way. And let yourself drift, as the myths themselves drift, into the quietest depths of the sea where the questions never end, but neither does the comfort of wondering. There is a certain kind of magic found in foods that stand the test of time. Dishes that survive not only years, but generations, passed down like family stories, become more than just recipes. They become anchors, little reminders of who we are, where we came from, and what still connects us. In Bikini Bottom, the Krabby Patty has become exactly that. What began as a humble creation on a squeaky grill inside a modest shack has grown into a timeless comfort. Ask any resident of the ocean floor, and they'll tell you, the Krabby Patty is not just a meal, it's a feeling. A gentle reminder that no matter how chaotic the sea currents of life may be, There will always be a warm, familiar taste waiting to bring you back to center. For children, the Krabby Patty is often their very first grown-up meal. The moment when their parents take them to the Krusty Krab and let them order one for themselves is a rite of passage. They sit on these stiff wooden benches, their tiny fins barely reaching the table, and wait eagerly as the tray slides across the counter. The first bite is always magical. To them, it's not about the balance of flavor or the mysterious perfection of the secret formula. It's about the moment itself, the sense of being part of something bigger, of sharing in a tradition that stretches back through the town's history. For teenagers, the Krabby Patty is often tied to friendship. After school, they gather in groups, filling booths with chatter and laughter. Their wrappers crinkle as they trade fries, sip sodas, and argue over whose patty has more pickles. These aren't just meals, they're memories being etched into the fabric of growing up. Years later, when they move on to new towns or new adventures, the very thought of a Krabby Patty will bring them back to those afternoons when life was simple and everything felt possible. For adults, the Krabby Patty becomes something else entirely, a reminder of stability. After long days of work with deadlines and worries weighing them down, they step into the Krusty Krab and inhale that unmistakable scent. It is the same as it was when they were children. It is the same as it will be tomorrow. And in that sameness, they find comfort. The Krabby Patty reminds them that even as everything else changes, the tides, the seasons, even themselves, some things remain constant. And for elders, the Krabby Patty is a taste of memory. Each bite carries them back to the early days of the Krusty Krab, when they first discovered its charm. Many sit quietly in their booths, eyes closed as they savor, not just the flavor, but the journey back through time. For them, the Krabby Patty is not only food, it is a bridge to younger days, to the laughter of friends long gone, to simpler times when they too were wide-eyed children eager for their first patty. The magic of the Krabby Patty's timelessness lies not in its ingredients, but in its ability to adapt to the lives of those who eat it. It becomes what the eater needs most: a celebration, a memory, a comfort, or a connection. Few foods achieve this kind of versatility. Even fewer manage to keep it for so many years. Part of this lies in the way the Krusty Krab itself has become a constant in Bikini Bottom. Its wooden beams may creak, its windows may be smudged, but its heart remains the same. The tables still hold the scratches of countless customers. The air still carries the sizzling sound of patties hitting the grill. The lanterns still glow warmly against the watery night. To walk into the Krusty Krab is to step outside of time, into a place where past and present meet in harmony. And so the Krabby Patty has become more than just Bikini Bottom's favorite dish. It has become its emotional anchor. Whether you are a child taking your first bite, a teenager laughing with friends, an adult needing a moment of peace, or an elder searching for a taste of memory, the Krabby Patty is there, unchanged, unwavering, eternal. This is the true secret, not just of the formula, but of its legacy. The Krabby Patty is timeless because it speaks to something timeless in us, the need to belong, to remember, and to feel comfort in a world that never stops changing. Comfort is never more precious than in times of struggle. And for the citizens of Bikini Bottom, the Krabby Patty has long been a quiet companion during those moments when the weight of life presses hardest. Picture a student, overwhelmed by their studies, notebooks filled with scribbles, fins trembling as exams loom. They leave school with a heavy heart, unsure if they can manage it all. But when they step into the Krusty Krab, something shifts. The smell of sizzling patties greets them like a reassuring hug. They sit down with a tray, unwrap the sandwich, and take a bite. Suddenly, the noise in their head quiets. The Krabby Patty doesn't erase their problems, but it gives them strength, reminding them that they are not alone, that comfort can still be found even in the storm. Or imagine a worker whose day has been long and unkind. Their boss barked orders, their fins ache, and the clock seems frozen. They wander into the Krusty Krab, shoulders slumped, eyes weary. Mr. Krabs' ever-watchful notices. SpongeBob, with his endless enthusiasm, cooks their patty with extra care, humming cheerfully as he flips it. By the time the worker takes their first bite, the day begins to feel softer. Not gone, not forgotten, but softened, like a sharp edge smoothed by the sea. Even heartbreak finds solace here. A young fish, tears in their eyes after love has slipped away, may find themselves sitting alone at a booth, staring at the golden bun before them. The patty doesn't mend the heart, but it offers warmth where there is coldness, taste where there is emptiness. And as they eat, they realize something important. Life still has flavor. The world has not ended. Comfort has not abandoned them. It is in these quiet, unseen moments that the true timelessness of the Krabby Patty reveals itself. For while festivals and celebrations bring many customers through the Krusty Krab's doors, it is the silent seekers of comfort who give it depth. The patty is there when joy is plentiful, but it is also there when joy is scarce, steady, unchanging, reliable. Sailors weary after storms have said that a Krabby Patty tastes like safety. Families struggling with hard times have said that it tastes like togetherness. Lonely souls eating alone at a small table whisper that it tastes like memory, reminding them of better days while promising that more will come. Part of this comfort comes not just from the food, but from the place itself. The Krusty Krab has never pretended to be more than what it is, a simple restaurant with wooden walls and squeaky floors. Yet its very simplicity makes it sacred. There are no expectations, no judgments, no demands. Just a meal, a seat, and a sense of belonging. SpongeBob's laughter often fills the air, his joy infusing the patties with something beyond ingredients. Squidward, even in his grumbling, adds to the familiarity. And Mr. Krabs, always keeping one eye on the register, ensures that the restaurant endures day after day, year after year. Together, they create an environment where people feel safe to breathe, to rest, and to heal. There are countless stories of how the Krabby Patty has been there during hard times. A widow who found comfort in visiting the same booth she once shared with her husband. A fisherman who returned home after months at sea, tasting a patty and realizing he was truly home again. A group of friends who comforted one another after loss. They shared patties, turning grief into quiet solidarity. Each story is different, but each shares a common thread. The Krabby Patty doesn't just fill stomachs, it fills gaps in the heart. And that is why it has become timeless, because comfort is something every generation seeks. Children need it, teenagers need it, adults need it, and elders need it. And as long as the Krusty Krab stands, the Krabby Patty will continue to be that comfort, not flashy, not extravagant, but dependable. In a world where tides change, storms come and go, and life can feel uncertain, the Krabby Patty remains a constant. A golden bun, a fresh patty, crisp lettuce, and that mysterious, magical formula. Always the same, always enough, always there. One of the most remarkable qualities of the Krabby Patty is its ability to move seamlessly across generations. Unlike passing fads or fleeting flavors, it never loses its relevance. Parents introduce it to their children, who one day introduce it to their own. The cycle continues, not out of obligation, but because the patty carries something that feels eternal. Take, for example, the family who gathers at the Krusty Krab after a long week. The grandparents arrive first, slow and steady, greeted warmly by the staff who have known them for decades. Their children arrive next, still in work clothes, shaking off the day's burdens as they settle into the booths. Finally, the little ones bounce in, excited and restless, tugging at menus, though they already know what they'll order. When the patties arrive, steaming and perfect, the generations share in something unspoken. The elders take a bite and remember their youth when the Krusty Krab was new. The parents taste reassurance, the familiar flavor of their own childhood dinners. The children giggle and marvel, feeling like they are part of something important. One meal, one table, 3 generations, all linked by a single sandwich. It is moments like these that make the Krabby Patty more than just a dish. It becomes a vessel of memory. The flavors don't change, but the people do, and in that contrast lies its timeless beauty. The bun is always soft, the patty always sizzling, the toppings always crisp, and yet, for each generation, the meaning shifts. To elders, it is nostalgia. To adults, it is comfort. To children, it is discovery. Stories often pass down alongside these meals. A grandfather may tell his grandchildren about the first time he ever ate a Krabby Patty, his eyes lighting up as he recalls the excitement of Bikini Bottom's early days. A mother might share tales of afternoons spent laughing with friends in the very same booths her children now sit in. And those children will grow up, carrying those stories like heirlooms, ready to tell their own someday. This chain of memory ensures that the Krabby Patty is never just frozen in the past. It is alive, constantly renewed, woven into the present by the people who eat it. And in that way, the Krabby Patty becomes a bridge, spanning not only time but also emotion, connecting generations who might otherwise feel separated by years and distance. Even families who move away from Bikini Bottom carry the memory with them. Letters, phone calls, or visits back home often include a mention of the Krabby Patty. "Have you been to the Krusty Krab lately?" they ask. "Does it taste the same?" And the answer always is yes. It still tastes the same. It always does. This consistency is what gives it such power. Children who grow up and move into adulthood can return to the Krusty Krab decades later and find the same flavors waiting for them. That kind of constancy is rare in a changing world, and it makes the Krabby Patty more than just a food. It becomes an anchor, tying people not only to their past, but to their families, their community, and their home. And for those who have lost loved ones, the patty can serve as a gentle reminder of them. Sitting in a booth, eating the same meal once shared with someone dear, can bring a sense of closeness, even in absence. Tears may fall, but alongside them comes gratitude. Gratitude that something as simple as a sandwich can carry so much memory. In this way, the Krabby Patty is timeless because it does not belong to one generation alone. It belongs to all of them, equally and fully. Each new group of diners adds their own stories, their own laughter, their own quiet moments of reflection. And the patty, unchanged, continues to be the thread that ties them together. It is no exaggeration to say that the Krabby Patty has become part of Bikini Bottom's cultural identity. It is not only food, but heritage, something every resident shares, regardless of age. To eat a Krabby Patty is to participate in history, to take part in a tradition that stretches back farther than memory and will likely stretch far into the future. As we come to the end of this story, it becomes clear that the Krabby Patty's endurance is not simply the result of a secret formula or a clever business. Its true power lies in something deeper, something intangible, its ability to comfort, to connect, and to remind. In the ebb and flow of life, change is constant. Shops open and close, new inventions rise and fall, trends flicker like the glow of a jellyfish before fading away. But the Krabby Patty remains. It has outlived fads, it has endured rivalries, it has survived storms, both literal and metaphorical. And it continues to thrive because it offers something that never goes out of style, the feeling of home. Think of the moments it has touched. A child's first bite, wide-eyed and unforgettable. A teenager's laughter echoing late into the evening. An adult's weary sigh of relief after a long day. An elder's quiet smile as memories resurface. Each moment is different, yet all are tied together by the same soft bun, the same sizzling patty, the same comforting taste. The Krabby Patty's timelessness also lies in its ability to adapt to each person's story. To some, it is a celebration. To others, it is a consolation. To some, it is a tradition. To others, it is a discovery. It becomes what the eater needs it to be, shaping itself not only to hunger, but to emotion. Few creations in any world achieve such a bond. Even beyond Bikini Bottom, the legend is spread. Travelers who taste it once carry the memory with them across the seas. They tell their own stories of a little restaurant with squeaky floors and glowing lanterns where a simple burger carried the weight of comfort. They may never return, but the taste remains with them, etched into memory like a favorite song or a cherished photograph. And so the Krabby Patty becomes timeless, not just through its presence, but through its echoes. It is remembered, retold, and relived in countless small ways. A story told to children at bedtime. A laugh shared among friends recalling youthful adventures. A quiet thought on a lonely night, wishing for the taste of home. For Mr. Krabs, the Krabby Patty was once a way to build his fortune. But over time, even he must have realized its deeper value. Wealth may come and go, but the legacy of comfort created by his restaurant will outlive any pile of gold. SpongeBob, ever devoted to the grill, ensures that every patty carries that same joy, that same spark of warmth, no matter who eats it. Even Squidward, though he may roll his eyes, plays his part in preserving the Krusty Krab's familiarity, his grumbles now as much a part of the experience as the patties themselves. The Krabby Patty has, in its own way, become a storybook of the sea. Each bite is a page, each memory a chapter, written not with ink, but with flavor. And as long as it exists, new chapters will always be added. Children yet to be born will one day sit at those wooden tables, take their first bites, and unknowingly step into the same story their parents and grandparents once lived. Perhaps that is the most comforting truth of all. The Krabby Patty is timeless, not because it resists change, but because it embraces continuity. It allows each generation to step into a tradition without erasing their individuality. It is both old and new, both yesterday and today. And tomorrow, it will be the same. So when you think of the Krabby Patty, think not just of a sandwich. Think of the countless lives it has touched, the countless hearts it has warmed, the countless moments it has made whole. Think of the way it has been there in times of joy and times of sorrow, in beginnings and endings, in childhood and in age. The Krabby Patty is more than a recipe. It is a promise. A promise that no matter how far you travel, no matter how much the world shifts, there will always be a place where you can return, sit down, and taste comfort once again. And that is why, for as long as Bikini Bottom exists, the Krabby Patty will endure. Not as a fad, not as a trend, but as a timeless comfort, a simple, golden reminder that sometimes the smallest creations carry the greatest meaning.